All right.
Yeah, you're live. You're live.
Awesome. So welcome everyone. This is an exciting session, a fireside chat with Farah Mariam Ali, one of my favorite person in tech and also a really good friend. This session is part of Global Tech Summit, which is a month-long series of virtual events that we are where we are bringing all the people from tech and startup industry to come together and share their knowledge and experiences with each other, so that we can learn from each other and we can you know basically build a community that is for tech in Pakistan and abroad. So welcome, Farah. Welcome to the session. Thank you
Yeah,
for joining us. So let
thanks.
me introduce. Sorry. Go ahead.
Yeah, go ahead. I was just saying thanks. It's really exciting to be here.
Right. So let me introduce Farah. Farah is she has so many dimensions of her profile that I'll try to capture most of her profile and her journey as part of this conversation. But not many people know that she has spent her early life in Karachi. She has her education until she moved to Canada to join the University of Waterloo. She went to LUMS, and then from there she moved. She joined Microsoft in Seattle, and from there Farah has not only successfully navigated the tech career, but also she climbed the career ladder. And in the past few years, she has been working as she has been part of eBay, and then she joined Electronic Arts as VP Engineering for developer experience. And right now, Farah is she has co-founded and she's also the CTO for a Seattle-based startup, FreightWeb. So Farah, that's a really diverse and long list of experiences. My question to you is, the first question I think everybody would like to know, starting from your journey from Karachi and here in the US, tell us about that. Especially the fact that when people look at someone who is successful, who is accomplished things in life, they usually look at the success part. So we would like to know, how was your life in Karachi, your life in Lahore, and then coming to the US and starting your job at Microsoft.
Sure. Thanks to Pakistan Tech Summit for giving me the opportunity. And as a co-founder of Pakistani Women in Tech, I'm so glad that we started this relationship. When it comes to my background, so basically I grew up I was born in Karachi. My family is originally from Lahore and from Punjab. So my father moved for work to Karachi. I went to city school most of my life, went to Lyceum for A-levels. And then after that, went to LUMS for a year and a half. My college career has been more nomadic. I went to LUMS, I moved to Waterloo, I moved to the US to City University. So it's been, I think I'm like a lot of other people who are probably watching this today, very average kind of background, middle class family, nothing, more than the fact that I think maybe I had earlier access to computers, to internet, and that could have been something that maybe gave me more of a worldview. But yeah, I think the important thing is for people to see that, I'm like most other people who grew up in Pakistan, my peers like myself.
You mentioned about having early access to computers, and this is something that you already, in one of your interviews, you mentioned about playing video games at a very young age and having access to that. How do you think that having, that kind of access contributed towards or helped you build the right foundation to be in tech?
I think first of all, getting comfortable with something, right? Getting really comfortable behind a computer screen, and then getting curious. So curiosity for how this thing works. When I type in something, what appears on the screen? How does that whole process works? So just like with, you hear of kids who love to open up the hood of a car and tinker with the engine. It's kind of, brought out that in me. I think the third aspect is just awareness, right? So it connects you very globally, getting access to the internet, you learn about things in other parts of the world that you're very sheltered from. Our schooling definitely was very Pakistan centric, very sheltered. So having that global perspective was something that I think now I see a lot of kids who are graduating. They definitely have a much more well-rounded understanding of the world and of culture. But I think when I was going through school, it was very, very South Asian centric, if not Pakistan centric. I think that made a difference. So just familiarity. Just I was probably more financially privileged than other kids, right, to be able to have access to a computer and have internet. So there is some of that economic privilege that comes into it, which you can't deny. And then just the sense of like curiosity and wanting to learn more when you've gotten a taste of something you like.
Right. So if you look back and if you at that time, did Farah know that how far she would go in life and doing things, joining
Not at all.
Microsoft, being part of EA?
Not at all. I mean, I think that, like you were saying, people see the end result. They don't see the journey. And probably if you look at my LinkedIn or my resume, it looks like a very planned effort, all the steps, but it really wasn't, right? And, in preparation for this conversation, I had to go back and really think about like, okay, what advice would I give? What were the things that enabled me? Because they weren't a conscious decision, right? And so some of it just kind of worked out. I'm sure that there are multiple Farahs who were trying similar things and it didn't work for them. So maybe there's definitely an aspect of being at the right place at the right time, right? Which is hard to quantify, but that's a very small part of it, right? I think the bigger thing is that at some point, like I think once I got into my first job, which was at Microsoft, I realized, that I need to understand not just my piece, not just the piece of code I'm writing or the area that I'm working on, but I need to see the bigger picture. I need to understand technology better overall. And not just how it works, but like, why do we use it? It's just a tool, right? And it's a tool that helps you do a lot of different things. And so getting that bigger picture, getting a picture of business is very important, of industry. That helped me navigate my career. For example, I moved to Search when I was in Microsoft. I was in developer tools and a few other teams. And Search is, when it was MSN Live, actually, it hadn't actually become Bing yet. And, I kind of saw that, Search is this machine learning search. These are areas that are growing. There's a lot of conversation about it. Google was still, a new thing, looking at sort of their ranking algorithms. So I think being aware of that, whereas I was very unaware of that when I was in college or when I was in Pakistan, about what's going on around the industry, what's happening. And part of it is access, but part of it is also, I would say, a lot to do with environment and culture, right? Like if that's just not the topic of conversation when you're meeting your friends or when you're going to someone's house, it's hard to build that habit. So I think it doesn't happen unless you make a conscious choice of like, I want to educate myself on these topics.
Yeah, that's very important. And that also brings me to my next question. Getting a job at Microsoft, and if people who are in that, who are students right now, it's pretty competitive to be in one of these companies, and it requires a lot of preparation, hard work, and and access to opportunities. So, how was your experience? I'm getting into Microsoft, and then what kind of skill set, just like you mentioned, that you had to learn not just your part but also others. So what are those things that you would like to highlight to other students who are currently in graduate school if they want to do something similar?
Sure. I think one of the, so the two things to separate are, first is, deciding what you want to do and then getting an interview in the places that you're interested in, right? That's a whole other prep that you require for that. And then there's, once you've gotten an interview invite, how do you navigate through the interview process? How do you answer those questions? How do you make it through a successful interview, right? I think, once again, I think there's a little bit more awareness now, but really there just wasn't any even 10, even 4 or 5 years back. And so for me, like, I took an Excel spreadsheet and I wrote down every company that I knew of within, whatever 500-mile radius of where I lived. And, I just wrote down their names, and then I just kind of started researching about them. I started looking at what jobs are available, and I just applied. It took me about a year, less than a year maybe, to get my first job, but around that time. And I was just very persistent, right? And I curated my cover letters to match the job, the exact description. I would tweak my resume to the exact job descriptions. I wouldn't just, send out these mass emails. I'd be very curated about it. Whenever I met someone or I found someone, through networking or at like a party who worked at Microsoft or some other company, I'd ask them if they were be willing to have a chat with me. Would they be willing to refer me? And so, one thing was, just being very persistent. I think if your qualifications match, you will get a call, but you definitely have a much higher chance of success if you can get someone to refer you, somebody who works for that company. Because when you're applying just online, it goes into kind of a black hole, right? There's 100 resumes going or 1,000 resumes going for that job posting. And so, if they're filtering through it, it helps if they know, oh, this person is someone who was referred by someone who works at the company. Therefore, there's something here that maybe we should look at. So that's your foot in the door. The second piece is the interview itself. The way that these tech companies interview here is very different. Or at least was very different. I haven't interviewed in Pakistan for a long time, but it used to be very different, compared to how Pakistani tech companies would interview you. And so you had to learn that whole process. There's some really good books now. There's like Cracking the Coding Interview. There's Lead Code online that gives you a lot of hands-on opportunity to practice. I remember that there was this video on Channel 9 MSN. I think I'm getting the name wrong, but something like that, Channel 9. And they had actually shown like, a mock whiteboarding interview. So they actually had a hiring manager, and then somebody, one of the people in the video pretended to be coming in for an interview. And then they walked through the whole process, right? Like how he would question him, how he would ask him the question, how he's solving it on the whiteboard. Because that was very important. I'd never been in that, so it was very important to see. And it's actually, if you think about it, a very unique thing. Not many other companies interview like this. You go for other jobs as a doctor or whatever, you get very knowledge-based questions about your field. Nobody asks you like general problem-solving questions or how to reverse a linked list or whatever that you never use, by the way. So it's really, you have to prepare for it like you would prepare for an exam, essentially. And you have to get very comfortable writing code on paper on the whiteboard. That's another thing most people are not comfortable with, because we are so used to our IDEs. We're so used to just having a, IntelliCheck or IntelliSense tell us when something we're doing is wrong. And so that's another piece where I would say practice. So to be able to ace that programming interview, you have to do a lot of mock interviews. You have to brush up on your data structures and algorithm skills. You have to be very confident about the language you're programming in. So pick a language that you're very comfortable in so you can do it on the fly. And I think the last most important thing that hiring managers are looking at is they're not necessarily looking at you, having the perfect answer. They just want to make sure that they can understand your thought process. How do you approach a problem? How do you break a big problem down into smaller chunks, solvable chunks? Are you able to see your own mistakes and correct them? Do you ask enough clarifying questions, or do you just make assumptions, right? Because if you make a wrong assumption at the beginning, your whole question will be wrong. So they're trying to see, do you have a rigid mindset or do you have a flexible learning mindset? So those are the other things they're looking for. They're not only looking for like beautiful, elegant code. And it's fine if your code doesn't work. But if you're able to explain why you wrote it that way and what changes you would make to it for it to work, that's a perfectly fine answer.
Awesome. Yeah, I think right now, given that there's a whole class that is graduating this summer, and this information is going to be super helpful. I have two leading questions from what you have just mentioned about networking and references. A lot of people do not find it very easy to network, and when they do, it's not very easy to ask for for a reference. So how would you recommend approaching, like what would be the best way to approach these two things that are not in my understanding, like it's not something that people are very comfortable doing. So what would you recommend?
Yeah, you're right. And I think part of why you and I co-founded Pakistani Women in Computing is that reason, right? Because
Right.
we ourselves didn't have a network. We didn't know how to approach people for, if you had a question about, I want to start my own company or I want to move from, this career ladder to this career ladder. So we said, let's get together this community that could help each other, right? And actually, we have a very healthy way of doing that in PWiC. We have people, if they're applying somewhere, we encourage them, send us the job you're applying for, the company you're applying for, all your details, and we will, find people in the network who can refer you. So I think the most important rule is if you're asking somebody for their time and you're asking somebody for their help, so don't forget to be grateful, right? I sometimes have people who will ask me to refer them in a very entitled way, like I'm this, refer me and let me know when it's done. So like, I have 100 things to do. If you're going to ask me nicely, maybe I'll consider it, right? But like, I don't want to be, I think I look at that and I say that person is probably going to not show up very well in an interview. And that will reflect on me, right? So that's the second reason when you ask to be referred, when I'm telling somebody at my work that, take this person for an interview, there's something comes with it. My reputation comes with it. So be mindful of that. Don't say or do anything that would disrespect the person who's referring you. If you're asking for a referral, do your homework, right? Know the company, know the job, have the rec ID, have your cover letter, have your resume, everything prepared. So you don't have to make this person do the work for you. Even send them an email like, hey, can you use this email for an intro or this email content for a referral? And so all I have to do is just forward that with attachments to the right person. There's a higher chance that it'll happen. Now to your question about, it's not comfortable for everybody to do it. It doesn't come naturally. I think that's true, right? It's true of you and me as well, right? And I think like initially, like to break through into this field, it was a lot of just hustling, right? Just going, talking to random people, applying to 100 different places to get one interview call. But I think once you get in, like once you've had some experience outside of university, it does help you. It makes you confident because you see other people, and it doesn't like, before I got into Microsoft, it was this unattainable, like, oh my God, Microsoft, right? But once I got in, I worked there, it was like, okay, there's just people like me and, it's not like all geniuses. There's some very average people like me too. So it's very easy to then connect with people at that level, right? And I think the in-person part is just a personality thing. Most of us feel a little embarrassed, a little ashamed. So it's a skill. I think if you approach it as not as I'm coming to ask you a favor, but more like out of like a curiosity. I love getting to know people. I would like to know your story. I would like to learn from you. If you approach it as I would like to learn from you, can you explain to me how you did it? I would say most people are very approachable and very happy to help, very happy to share their story, very happy to say, okay, this is how I would do this, So it's your own sort of bias, it's your own sort of reservation. So you have to find ways to overcome it. Networking is, my final thought is it sounds like it's become a bad word. Like, people who network are somehow can't do it on their own. Networking just really means that, you have this circle of influence or you have this circle that and now you're just widening that circle. It doesn't mean that you're directly benefiting financially or in any other way from them. It just means that, you're growing yourself, right? The more people the more diverse experiences you see that there's a whole world out there. There's so much that you don't know. So it's just an important learning and growing experience, right? So if you don't approach it as I need someone's help, and it approaches as, I want to get to know you, it's very important.
Right. There's one of my favorite things about networking, and this is something that one of my managers mentioned, that your network is your net worth. So the more the bigger network you have, the more access you have to opportunities. But there's also a fear of rejection, like people, especially who are asking for help. It's it's also like, what if the other person says no, or what if I do not, what if they think that I'm not as good as I'm presenting myself to be, which also ties back to imposter syndrome. What do you recommend? I'm actually getting a lot of questions about that. So what do you recommend? What do you recommend about, just getting over that, the fear of rejection and the fear of maybe I'm not good enough, and maybe they think that I'm misusing this connection.
Yeah. Look, I think that fear, that imposter syndrome, that not feeling good enough, insecurity in general, it's not just a work-related thing, right? It's something that we experience in our personal life, with our friends, with our loved ones. So that's something you as a human just need to work on. You as a human need to figure out, how important is this person's message to me? How do I take this person's feedback, right?
Right.
I think it's true. It's networking is very hard. It's very hard for women. We go to an event, and even I'll tell you, like a social event, right? There's usually this, the men will gather around and start talking politics and career, and then we'll start talking designer law, and whether we want to or not, right? We just have to fit this mold or whatever. And that's what I mean by your network, right? So it doesn't have to be. It doesn't mean that you're networking with like really influential rich people. It's about opening your mind, right? So if you have a group of friends around you who are like-minded, whether they work or not, whether they have a job or not, doesn't matter, right?
Right.
But you don't have to have small talk with them. You can talk about your big ideas. You can share your dreams, right? That's very, very important. And so not really restricting, like if you're going to treat someone like a resource, like if I'm going to only talk to you, Huma, when I need something from you, that's going to piss me off, even if you're my friend, right? It's not just about networking, right? So
Right.
you have to make sure that it is a win-win for both sides. And there will be times that you'll approach someone and they'll, sort of be like, no, I don't have time for you. And that's okay. Make sure you're professional, you're respectful, and that's the best that you can do. I think that we do sort of, I mean, you said this phrase, your network is your net worth. It's a nice catchy phrase, but I don't, like, when I started out, I didn't have a network, right? Like I didn't, network of city school or lyceum didn't help me get my job. And I think the network really started once I got into Microsoft. And once and that wasn't even immediate. Like it took me a long time. Like I was saying, it took me a while to figure out the importance of knowing the big picture, knowing people. So a lot of it comes from growth and understanding. And a lot of it is about curiosity. A lot of it is about how much you want to learn. And so I think if you have a very specific goal, like I want to, like if somebody, I'll give my example. I have a lot of people reach out to me. Can you refer me for a job, here and here? And my rule is, I'll just say, if you send me this, I'll go ahead and do it, But there have been times where I've just not replied to someone because they've just rubbed me off the wrong way, and I'm in my normal head, I'm thinking I have 100 things to do, and what does this person think? And, they just think that they're so entitled. Why shouldn't I help this other person who is so much more deserving? So it's how you come across, really, and just, being, if you call me like successful or whatever, one of the things people who, when they reach a certain position in their career, I think what they love is giving back, is helping others. So I think if you're able to sort of break out of that shell and reach out, you'll find that there's a lot of people very willing to help. They just don't know how. And you're actually helping them. But just be very, very respectful. Do your homework. Don't put it on them to tell you this is what you should do. This is how you should write your cover letter. Like do all that work, because that's not the best use of their time, right? The best use of their time is to really pass on things that they have learned that you cannot otherwise learn in a book or through a class. Yeah. Hey, what do you think? I wanted to ask you about why should you ask me all the questions?
Yeah, it's going back to the networking part, and you're absolutely right that one of the key things we tried doing with PWiC as well, to make sure that people find it comfortable, or it's easy for them to network in a safe space. There has been time when I've approached someone and that person was not available, and I've learned not to take it personally, and that has actually helped me move on to my next step really fast. And then also I usually go back to my experience of doing a lot of volunteer work. So when I'm doing something, I have seen all those people that I have ever worked for their causes when they were not big enough, they came back and they helped me with the things that I was doing. And it was like a two-way relationship. So it was not like, oh, I'm only helping you because I will need your help sometime in future. That was not my intention. So when I reached out, it was a very they returned the favor. So it's a two-way street. And I would just recap what you're saying for everyone who is listening, that networking is definitely hard, but you can still try it. Take a small step, one step at a time, and get out of your comfort zone. Prepare, do your homework, and be respectful. And if someone is not able to get back to you and your expectations are not met, do not take it personally. They may have other things going on. So that's the key takeaway from this conversation. So Farah, moving on to the next question, and I'm asking a lot of these questions around interviews and jobs because I know you are very passionate about it, and we never got the opportunity. And I know that a lot of uh, uh, people in this community, both in PWiC and in the community that Arzish and his team is leading, similar set of problems and questions around how to take the next step in my career. So let's move on to climbing the leadership part. Um, from my experience, I can tell you, and I have seen so many other people around me, it's not easy to break into middle management. That's like a really hard thing to do. Once you do that, then navigating and then keeping that trajectory is also something that I have not seen a lot of people were able to do. So not only like looking at your journey and profile and you being a role model, right? You have just made it seem like, oh, this is something doable. Like if I uh, talk about myself, I don't think I ever thought how far I'll be able to go. But now we have so many other people like you who are immigrants who came to this country, who built their foundation, from scratch. Now I can see, okay, if they can do it, maybe I can do it too. So you made it relatable, you made it tangible. What's your how was your experience breaking into leadership? And was it easy? Was it hard? And what did you do to be successful in that?
All right, so a couple of questions in there. I think the first,
Mm-hmm.
because you hit on it, I'm a first generation immigrant.
Mm-hmm.
Many people are, right? We're just coming here for work, essentially, right? We've done our schooling other places. And so it's very important to understand work culture here, right? And
Right.
it's not just, there's not one work culture in the US. And I'm talking from a very US specific context because that's my context. So, might not be relevant to everyone. But every company has its own culture, right? Like when I moved from Microsoft to eBay, I realized that, it took me a while, but I realized that, oh, Microsoft is a very sort of email, write everything down, documented culture. And eBay was a much more face to face, talk it out, build consensus culture. It was very
Mm-hmm.
different cultures, right? And you cannot underplay the importance of those because how you show up in meetings, right? Like I realized very quickly that I should not use the phrase when I was in Microsoft because nobody, people at eBay or EA or whatever don't care. They don't care what university you came from, what your experience was at your previous company. They want to know that
Mm-hmm.
you understand them and their current culture, right? So
Right.
have that humility even as you grow, that you don't know everything. You're getting in a new space. You may know tech, but you don't understand how eBay works or company X works. So really very
Mm-hmm.
important to understand the culture, and that helps you present yourself in meetings with the right, with somebody saying, oh, okay, she's one of us, she gets it, she's ramped up really quickly. Um, I think the second part is, you talked about breaking through middle management or getting into an executive role. That's not easy for anyone, I would say,
Mm-hmm.
So work culture, understanding culture is a very important part of it. Understanding who has the influence on your career, right? So when I'm being reviewed, who are the other people in the room, right?
Mm-hmm.
And who are the 4, 5, 6 people, and do I have a relationship with them, right? Most of the
Right.
time we just focus on, a lot of young people when they're getting in, they just focus on their job, meeting deadlines. They don't really know the change, they don't understand how the org works. So
Mm-hmm.
as you sort of kind of mature, get an understanding of how the org works, who reports to the CEO, who are the next levels, how do they relate to you, who's in your org. Because if let's say, like, I'm in a review meeting and Huma is being discussed, right? And if I've never seen your work, maybe I've just ran into you in the hallway, I most likely will say I'm neutral because I don't know. I have an impression of you. So if people in that area of influence don't know your work, how can they comment on it, right? How can they have an opinion on you? So it's usually that they don't know you or they don't know about you and they're neutral. So you need to make sure that, it's better than having a negative opinion on you. So being neutral is better, but having at least 2 people in a room of 8, 3 people in a room of 8 know you, know your work, and speak up, be your ally, be your sponsor. It's very important to be understanding of that and have somebody that you can actually, from your manager, if you don't know, ask your manager, have them introduce you. Those are that's not networking, that's your job, right? That's like, I need to know who is there, who's going to represent me. Because if you're a manager, you're not just representing you, you're representing your team. How you do makes an impact on all their careers as well, right? And then in terms of like I guess your third question about limitations, I think it's like, I guess maybe one thing is I didn't really think of it like that I have limitations, and maybe that helped, right? Maybe I was just so overconfident. So maybe being overconfident helps. I just, like I would get to a certain level and it's almost like, you go to 8th grade, then you go to 9th grade, then you go to 10th grade. So that was just what was next. And I knew that I wanted to have more impact. I think for every job change or every company change, it's been about impact. That like, oh, I'm working as a dev on this button here, or I'm working as a dev on this, ranking algorithm here that's just going to help this part. How do I have more and more influence over company decisions, over how our product impacts customers, over other things, diversity initiatives of the company? And I just realized that the way to do that was to go up in your seniority. And so that is what kind of drove me, the fact that I just always wanted to have more and more impact. And then I think I would say the manager to senior manager is a jump, but then that senior manager to director is like that big jump. That's hard. And I can probably can't squeeze everything in this time frame, but I would say that you have to balance between as somebody called it, being too ambitious, which I didn't know was a bad thing. So drive. You have to drive your own career. You have to know that, but you also have to know that that can't be your only thing. Like you don't just come across as a person who's like, I'm doing this so I can get promoted, right? You have to show that you are. Not just show. You have to care about the product. You have to care about what you're doing. You have to care about the team. You have to show that you are someone who knows that business decisions come first, the company or the team comes first, right? You don't have a very narcissistic point of view, because you're not then being a good leader. You're not being someone who exhibits the emotional maturity. So in a lot of these roles, they're not just looking for the best technical person only. They're looking for someone who has the emotional maturity, who can stay calm under pressure, who's not the one yelling in meetings, and can take measured decisions. So it's the same sort of leadership bar that you would have for other companies as well. So I think people sometimes forget that, and they focus too much on like, I'm better than this person, and it becomes like this this almost this ego war, whereas you're being viewed for someone who they can think long term and can think company and company benefit. So I think balancing that too, because I do see sometimes people they just get taken the wrong way because they come across as like me, right? Yeah. So I think that's one. But yeah, I mean, I don't deny it. It is hard to break through, especially that senior manager to director jump. Director to senior director is not that hard. It's just a level of like performing more. And then the VP is definitely getting into VP, SVP. That is definitely super hard. It's also because most companies have quotas around how many VPs they can have, how many SVPs they can have. So it's not just about you being ready and having the capability. They have to have if they only, let's say, if there's only 5% or 8% of the company that's VPs, then somebody has to be kicked out of that slot for you to get that slot.
Right.
So it's not just completely like, readiness and merit based, it's also availability based. And it's not just work, right? They have to see you making impact at multiple levels, right? That you're a CEO and C-level see you as someone who is integral to the company's brand, integral to the company's, growth, hiring. That you are somebody who represents the company externally in a very positive way. Internally, are also just adding value beyond what you're doing, right? So I would say look at not just your own space, but then your broader impact. What are some other things you can make an impact on to be able to be considered for those roles?
Okay. One question, and if you can briefly answer, then we will go to the next section. A lot of, again, going back to asking for that next promotion. I have seen or this thing comes up a lot, that shouldn't be that obvious that I'm ready for promotion or I'm performing. Like I have seen like there's an expectation from your management that they should just know that you are ready and you should be promoted, while you have never made that ask. So, and it's what would you like, how important it is to ask for that kind of position and how to approach that question?
I think you and I have worked now a long time, right? I mean, there's some exceptional managers who are very aware of everybody in their team and developing them and helping them grow and knowing when to promote them. That's not common, right? Because we all like, I'm a people manager, yes, but I've got my personal life. I've got 100 other things I do. I'm not going to be sitting there and looking at the 150 people in my org to see who, should this person move from SD1 to SD2, or, maybe I'm looking at a very subsection, but I'm hoping that I'm passing on to the next level of management to be able to do that for their smaller team, right? So part of it is, if that's not happening, we're definitely not training our people managers well, and we're not helping them to understand how to grow people. The second is that, yes, while you should have certain expectations from your manager, you should also know that, your career is the most important to you only, right? Your life, your career, nobody else will be as interested in your, academic achievements or your work achievements than you. So you have to make a plan and you have to drive your career, right? And it can be something as simple as you sit down with your manager and doing a one-on-one and then make a list of shared expectations, right? What are your expectations of your manager? What are their expectations of you? And then, how do these two match? And no, just make it clear. Like, don't let them know a month before you expect a promo that you expect a promo, right? You have a multiple years to develop. So let them know, have a, career conversation one day, right? Send them an agenda. Say, look, I'm going to be setting up a 1 hour with you next week. I want to talk about my career growth. I want to talk about areas for improvement. I want to talk about, where you see me as, and then go in, and that person is prepared. They'll have done some homework, and then let them kind of tell you what you need to do to get to the next level. What do they expect of you? What do they want to see from you? And get a sense of time frame, right? And then when you've done that and your time frame is reached and you're not getting the, what you expected, right? Sometimes you will get we don't have budget for it, right? And then you should speak up for yourself and say, look, the budget is not my problem, right? I am making, all the checks on all the things that you asked me to. And so if it's going to be budget based, then, what are my options, right? But I think also know that when you think that you've outgrown your current team, your current company, your current manager, if you are in that position where you think you're not being recognized, then you owe it to yourself to also make that change, right? Make a change to another team or company or manager who will recognize that about you. But it's not always black and white, right? Maybe it's like your manager thinks you need 6 more months and you don't really think so. But then what you need to tell yourself is, look, 6 months in a 20-year career is not a big deal. It's a drop in the bucket. So don't be short-sighted. You've put in all this effort for 3-4 years, and just for 6 months, you're going to, let that go. So I think you have to work with them. The challenge comes when you know that you have a manager who is not invested in you, could be adversarial, and is not invested in getting you to grow. I think you need to be aware of that, and you need to cut your losses when you're in that situation, because human nature. If you're with somebody who doesn't like you, and cannot separate that from your work, then you really need to sort of either figure out something or move on.
Okay. Yeah, that's a really good advice. And I also, voice the same thing, that you're saying, that you are in charge of your career. So if other people are not seeing that in you and you have outgrown, then it's your responsibility to take the next action. And somebody said, and I really like, and I always try to remember this when I'm making career decisions, that you don't serve a company or a team or a person, you serve an industry. So if you're passionate about industry, if you're passionate about your contribution, you should be able to find the next opportunity and navigate. All right, so let's move on to the last three questions that I have. And so you were a VP engineering when at EA before you decided to take on another venture, co-founding a tech-based startup in Seattle in a space, trucking and transportation, that is also very unconventional. So what made you take that, leap when you were already comfortable? One would think, I have already achieved the career that I wanted to achieve, and I'm already comfortable in my position. So why take another risk, and why do something that is, it's definitely more challenging than having a stable career. So tell us about your venture with FreightWeb as a CTO and a co-founder.
Yeah, I ask myself that question a lot these days. But I think it goes back to that, right? Like a comfort, right? So when I'm somewhere, and that's, the comfort and impact thing has definitely made me change teams and companies, and now quite a big shift. I was just sort of thinking about, okay, what's next? I'm a VP, I can be SCP, I can aim for C-level at some other company. And I've always had the startup bug. I think every time that I've wanted to create a company, the idea has been something that I was like, oh, I can make a nonprofit out of that. So I've helped or founded a lot of nonprofits, just because probably that's just where my passion lies. And so I was thinking about this, and I just was like, for me, it felt like an inflection point, that if I don't do it now, if I don't go into this route and co-found a company and take that risk, I won't do it, because the opportunity cost is very high for me. And I looked at other stuff, right? Like I have two daughters, they're 10 and 5. So, and it's not going to get easier as they get older. So the timing seemed like, okay, it's again an inflection point. And then, an opportunity as well, right? So sometimes you could want something and timing and all of that is perfect, but you don't find something that really resonates with you. And one thing that I've always done is I've kept the tech part very stable. Like that's been my focus. That's been what I've built my street cred for, right? And then I've moved around, domains or companies. So I've, moved from developer tools to search, to e-commerce, to machine learning, to gaming, and now logistics. So, but all the while sort of staying in the technical side. So that was another thing where I get to learn this space. And I was looking at this area. Trucking is roughly 4% of GDP of any country. So it's a huge market. It's about 800 billion market for the US. And, started looking at some data around that. And 25% of trucks on the road are half full by weight. There are these weigh stations on the highways, and they weigh these trucks. And then I was looking at sort of other stats, like for hire fleets. So out of the 800 billion, let's say about 300 billion is Walmart and Target and sort of private fleets. But from the for hire fleets that are not private fleets, about a billion of that, or 97% of that is 20 trucks or less. So it's a huge fragmented market as well. And so it just is an area where in recent years, Convoy, Keep Trucking, a few other companies have made some good dents. I just felt like it's still such a big space that really, disrupted by tech. I don't like the word disrupted as much. Adding efficiency through tech. They require some digital transformation for simple things, right? Like you would think that all the paperwork is pretty much automated and digital, and people use their devices. the penetration of smartphones is so low in this community. The penetration of logging your miles is so low in the community. Just understanding of tech is pretty low. So it's definitely an area where I could see, helping drive profitability. And then I met Bill Payson, who's my co-founder, and he was at FedEx for 20-ish years. He was at Amazon for a long time. So he definitely had a lot of the industry knowledge. And he had a great idea around a hardware innovation that really excited me as well. So we got in knowing that it's a big addressable market, that we have a couple of software and hardware ideas that are innovative and aren't being done. And then that's it. That's really the best you can do, right? And then you just kind of dive in. And for people who've done it before, it's probably easier. They know how to, but even for them, I'm sure it's not the same. Every startup is different. For me, it's completely like I've only been big company, corporate. So I had to learn, how do you hire for a company when you can't give them, free food and lots of money, and so how do you find people who are really good and want to join you because they are passionate about the space or they love startups? So how you hire is very different. Talking to VCs, talking to investors is very different. So you have, these people that have invested in you and they want to see results, right? So like being very metrics driven from day one, being able to show and being able to know what they're looking for is very important. But yeah, I think to really sort of just answer the question you asked, which is why, I think it's the comfort zone piece, right? I think I was too comfortable. And I knew that, I could just do that job with my eyes closed and, it's okay, I can do something new. And honestly, the biggest reason why it took me so long, or why I even second guess myself today, is because I'm very afraid of failing, because I've not failed in a long time, right? And I was doing well. And so what if I can't bounce back from this? What if this doesn't work? What are people going to say? What am I going to say? So of course I have all of these insecurities and all these questions. But then, I look at that's not why I that's not why I went to school. That's not why I got a job. I really do like learning and growing. And that's happening at an accelerated rate. Like I've learned more in the last 6 months than I did in the last 6 years. Sometimes I feel so I definitely don't regret it, but it's not for everyone. And so, if you're thinking seriously, and I'm saying this to anybody who's thinking seriously of doing a startup, talk to people. Don't just make an emotional decision. Make a very calculated, practical, rational decision. It may not be the right time for you, or it may be, but there may be other factors that you need to look at. So I would definitely say talk to a few people who done it before, and I did. I talked to a lot of people. I got some really useful advice, and not a single person told me to, yes, go for it. This is great. Well, maybe one person did, but she's very different from everyone else. But I think most people were like, you're in it for kind of a crazy ride. So hang on and don't expect that it'll get easy anytime soon. And that has been very correct.
Right. So I think it's really awesome that you put yourself out there and admitting to the fact that fear of failure, and you haven't seen anything like in a long time. So given your your career journey, we wish you all the best in in your venture, and we look forward to seeing this company grow and seeing you grow. Let me move on to the last two questions. And you mentioned PWiC, and I think I forgot to mention in the start of the during the introduction that this whole event is actually PWiC is actively participating. They're co-hosting Global Tech Summit virtual series alongside Ijad Labs. So and this was one of our goals, to bring all those women out of the shadow there and bring them forward, highlight their work, make them part of the conversation, not just as being just as because of their gender, but because of the work that they are doing. And you have co-founded PWiC with me, and you've been running another nonprofit, One Good Act. So you mentioned about your you have a thing for founding, new initiatives. Tell us about your social, entrepreneurship, and where do you see that these kind of initiatives help the community and help society in general?
Yeah, I think it's, I mean, the bigger question of, how they help society or the community, I don't know. I'm sure that there's people who think that we should leave the work of, nonprofits to the people who know them. And so there's probably a whole other debate around it. I can just only speak for my own, personally why I do it. And it's, it's giving back, right? You get to a certain point, and if you're the kind of person that I am, where you feel like you need to pass it on, you need to help someone else, you kind of figure out how you can do it at the broadest way. So it just, taking it from, what I do as an individual or what we do as a family to doing it more broadly. That's the same with PWiC, right? I found myself having lots of coffees and lunches and mentoring hours with so many people, men and women, and not just Pakistani, right? That I thought, okay, how do I make this so that I can just approach it way more broadly, and a lot more people can get access to not just me, but like other people's experience. So it's basically that. One Good Act is really just it's really focused on alleviating poverty, and it's very focused on the developing world. There are some homeless causes that we work on here in Seattle, where I live. But in Pakistan, in Karachi, I partner with Al Zura Welfare Association. We run a school, so it's basically K-12 education. We run a school. We own the curriculum. There's no monthly fee. We provide a stipend for families to come and send their kids to school, because that's a big problem. If they're families whose children can earn, then they prefer them to go on rather than go to school. And so we try to help them by giving them a stipend. Then we have some programs around, just very need-based programs, like a ration program. So we give a monthly ration of, dal, chawal, atta, chini, chai, oil to families who we've vetted, and they have their card holders. We do a lot of vocational training. So one of the things is, how do we get people to be independent, financially independent? So we do trainings around, we have like a salon course, a skincare course, computer literacy. So that's something where I help, people have graduated these courses. So for example, they'll do our English literacy and our computer literacy vocational course, and then they'll go to a multinational company and work at their, as an administrative assistant there, and, for really good pay. Or they'll start their home-based businesses for a salon or selling, because we don't just teach the skill of how to do it, but we also teach how do you run a business, how do you look at profitability, some of those soft skills, right, that people don't really teach you or you don't learn at school.
Right.
Yeah, I think PWiC, going back to that, because it's more relevant here. It's like giving back. It's being able to have a broader impact, and seeing how all these people talked about networking, and how do you break that ice, and when you don't feel that you're good enough, you don't have the credentials. I feel like we've built a community where people don't feel that way, where anybody can reach out to anybody else and sort of ask, or get connected, right? And I think they look at us to sort of, when I say us, I don't mean you and me, I mean everybody from the community.
Everyone. Yep.
Right? And emulates, right? So if Farah can give a talk, I can give a talk. If I can change jobs, I can change jobs. So it's a lot of that, right? They're learning to let go of some of their fears. I have people who, I think it's, even though you and I will both say, like, reach out, it's not a problem, they'll still feel very uncomfortable. So I'll sometimes have people ask you to introduce them to me rather than coming directly. It's okay. I think that's just over time you will sort of get over that. And I'm answering this question too by Sabah, because she mentioned she's new to the field. It can feel really weird, like if you don't have the credentials.
Right.
And I think that, but that's all in your head. Like, your credentials. Other people don't. You don't have to think about introducing yourself as your credentials. Just go there and have a interesting conversation. Introduce yourself, and what do you do? ask people about themselves. One mistake that we all make is, we end up talking about ourselves a lot and not really giving the other person a chance. People love to talk about themselves. People love to share their passion. So, start the conversation, with like, and this is to Sabah's question is, I'm Sabah, I work at blah, what do you do? I'd love to learn more about you. And then just, listen intently. Don't just ask a question and tune out and then ask your next question. Listen to them, have a real conversation, connect with them on a human level, right? That's really the best we can do.
Okay. I'm going to address one last question and then we will go back to if there are any questions. And the way Farah and I, we formatted this whole talk is not to put focus on the gender lens. And that is one thing that we would really wanted to make sure that when any one of us, when we are talking about our achievements or our contributions and successes, that should not be the only lens that people should look at us. So, but still, it's still important. It's the intersectionality of our, us being first generation immigrant, us being transitioning through different countries and then breaking into tech, which is challenging, and then breaking into and learning to navigate new cultures, new companies, and you have talked about a lot of that. So I would go back to this question about how being a woman in tech, how does it impact and I would break that question into two. How does it impact you in your career, and how did it impact you as as a parent? Because you have a family, you have responsibilities towards your immediate family, extended family, and you have all these other initiatives going, and you are also making, you're thriving at your career as well. So how do you harmonize all those aspects of life? And what do you think is the most challenging part of being a woman in that mix?
So many easy questions, Huma.
I never said it's going to be easy.
All right. So I'll address the gender thing first, right? I mean, I think for us, like you said, it's not just gender, right? You're a person of color, first generation immigrant, have a bit of an accent. People don't know how to place us. So it's, from the start, it was different. You change a little, you assimilate a little. It evolves over time. If I were to like really think about crisply how it's impacted my career, I think that access. So if a lot of my peers are men, they just are much more comfortable going out together after work, doing stuff, or joking with each other, or making plans. So there's a lot of these conversations that happen not during work, not at the desk, not at the table, that I'm not a part of, right? Or there are opportunities where they don't think of me, not because I'm a woman, it's just because I'm not right there, front of mind, right? If you have a room of 100 people and only 10 are women, it's not that you're automatically biased against the women. You just see the majority more, right? So it's like I had to work a little bit harder showing up. And I did some stupid things like, I was in meetings, I would make a goal like, okay, I'm going to make at least 2 comments during this meeting. Like, I'm not going to be quiet. Because that is also it goes back to, I'm an introvert. I don't respond quickly to things. I need to take the information, I need to process it, and then I need to come back with an answer. But that wasn't always an option. So I had to change myself at work. So I'm at work, I'm an extrovert, and I'm, forced to do that. And so that just means that when I'm outside of work, I need a lot more time to decompress. I need time to sort of just, not be talking to people. That kind of wears me out. But at work, I have to have a different work persona. So I think that's one where sometimes I have to be someone I'm not. And again, the more senior you go into your career, the less of that you have to do. So I realized that the more, successful again that I got, I was able to be more of myself, and people were more respectful of that. And so I think that was one thing. Then balancing work life, I think there's no answer, right? I mean, everybody has very different lives and very different responsibilities. I think for me, it's cyclical. So I have these bursts of, I'm gonna, time box this and just these 2 months, I'm going to work really hard on PWiC. And then these other 2 months, I'm going to really focus on my kids, piano lessons and school activities or whatever else. These other times, I'm going to focus on this. So there's these bursts of, activity. I think that's how I work. But there's always 2 to 3 things that I keep that you have to do consistently, because discipline and consistency is a key to a lot of things. So there's certain things that you just have to do daily, and that's something that I don't compromise on. So what will happen is, I won't go to all the parties I'm invited to, or I won't have as many people over as I want to. So those are the kind of maybe sacrifices I make, or maybe I wouldn't spend as much time with my friends as I would when I'm doing this. But it doesn't mean that I don't do all of those things. So it's really just, how I balance it, not in a day, because I think it's a day or a week is very difficult to balance your life. So you have to look at it in I think a larger chunk, like how did your month go, and how is your year going, and how are your 6 months? And it does help to have some goals, not just work goals, but personal goals, right? Like I literally have to say, like, I am going to read these 10 books this year because something always happens and I don't get the time to read. Or I am going to, spend more time with my parents, and I am going to take these 2 vacations. So you become sort of maybe less spontaneous in some ways, but I think planning and prepping definitely helps you balance better. So I think I find people who are not good planners struggle more. And I feel for them because I'm not a natural planner, but I think it's just a habit I've cultivated, because it would be quite impossible, frankly, to do everything without doing that. So
awesome.
As I hope I answered both of your questions a little bit.
Yes, you did.
I think the gender one is just like, there's a whole conversation about it. I just want to say one thing, that yes, it does have an impact. It's not that everybody looks at you equally, and to sort of have that false narrative is not cool, because it doesn't help us. Only if you know that there is a difference, then you can work at it. Then you can sort of figure out what it is and make that disappear. But I do think that I've had to work harder in some areas and have had to prove myself more. But it wasn't explicit, right? Nobody said, Farah, you have to work harder here to prove to me that you can do this, right? It's something that I intuited out of the situation and had to work on.
Okay. Yeah, it's just wrapping up about the harmony question. Yes, you take there's no right answer to what works for everyone. So they really have to look at their life priorities and how can they harmonize different priorities in an overall as a long-term goal, and also going back to the impact part. So Farah, I love this about you, that we can keep talking. There's so many dimensions of your career, and where we can keep asking you questions, and your ability to take a really deep dive when it comes to technical interviews, and then also talk about the overall tech industry, so which is amazing. So I'm seeing a lot of questions, but we are also we are actually over time, so I'll wrap up the conversation by thanking Farah and by thanking PWiC and Global Pakistan Tech Summit team, Ajad Labs, for giving us the opportunity to come and speak here. The intention behind having this conversation was is having this giving you an idea about when we look at people, we just look at their final their success story, but there is a lot that contributes toward making them get to some place where we think they are successful or inspirational. And also the idea behind storytelling is not to just start replicating what they have done, but to understand that they have learned how to be agile, how to be to be responsive to all the different things that they were going through in life. So if you are given opportunities to do things, you just have to be prepared to tap into those opportunities and keep an open and growth mindset to be successful. So thank you, Farah, and thank you, Arzish, and thank you everyone for listening and joining. If there are more questions, we're happy to host more sessions with Farah. But I think we had a really good chat. Thank you.
Thanks for having me. Bye.
Bye.